It's My Nerd World, a Star Wars podcast. Glad you're with the show this week. We actually have some official news to share with you. We'll get to that coming up. Also on the show this week, The Empire Strikes Back tops the box office. Yes, some movie theaters are open. Yes, a lot of people went to go see The Empire Strikes Back on the big screen. We have multiple casting rumors for live-action Star Wars Disney Plus shows, including Hayden Christensen. And we will get into that official news of The Bad Batch from the Clone Wars series is in the works. Once again, I'm glad you're with the show this week. It is brought to you by mynerdworld.net. At mynerdworld.net, you can find out about all things relating to the podcast of My Nerd World, concept art and cover art for the EMBARK science fiction space opera novels, and an almost daily blog that I'm doing at the revamped website. EMBARK Book 1 is a science fiction adventure set in the future. It's a story of a boy who's an alternative music and Depeche Mode fan, also a fan of Star Wars in the book, who's in love with a girl in the middle of the apocalypse. I'll have more to say about that at the end of the show this week. But speaking of which, let's get right to it.
Nothing will stand in our way.
I find your lack of faith disturbing.
I will finish what you started.
Who are you? I'm no one.
There are stories about what happened.
It's true. All of it.
The Force. It's calling to you. Just let it in.
It is a Star Wars podcast, and I'm your host, Jon Justice. Glad you are with the show again this week as we talk about that galaxy far, far away. I watched Last Jedi last weekend. I'm not sure the last time I had watched it since the release of The Rise of Skywalker. I can't believe The Rise of Skywalker has been out for 6 months. I'll get back to that in just a moment. Yeah, it was really interesting. I hadn't watched the movie in a long time because I've been wiping out watching The Rise of Skywalker, and it's been a couple of weeks since I've watched that. I think I'm going to watch it this weekend, probably tonight. But yeah, I sat down and I watched The Last Jedi, and it must have been a while because it was a very exciting viewing of the film, and I think that was because I hadn't watched it in a while, and I'd been spending so much time with the J.J. Abrams new Star Wars via Force Awakens and The Rise of Skywalker that sitting down and watching The Last Jedi, I almost felt like I had fresh eyes on the film. Loved it as much as I always have. These two Star Wars movies. I do love The Force Awakens, but specifically The Last Jedi and The Rise of Skywalker. In my opinion, they just complement each other so well. They are very different. The pacing is different. Tone's a little bit different. The way they're shot is obviously different. I've talked quite extensively about the way that The Last Jedi is, the cinematography in The Last Jedi is incredible, but the filter used that Rian Johnson uses on a lot of his films that his director of photography does, it just adds a very different aesthetic. There is a definite timeless feel to The Last Jedi that I don't think The Rise of Skywalker or The Force Awakens will have. Specifically The Rise of Skywalker. I think The Force Awakens, the way J.J. Abrams shot that, was a little bit more akin to the original trilogy. But clearly, in my opinion, with The Rise of Skywalker, J.J. Abrams went all in and this is a J.J. Abrams Star Wars movie, and added a little bit more of his signature lens flare, a little bit more style choices. He was a little bit braver with the style choices than he was with The Force Awakens. But going back and watching The Last Jedi, I already feel like that movie is, in my opinion, a masterpiece, but there was there was a new appreciation that I had watching that film, having the complete story now cemented in my head, and I really enjoyed. I love Star Wars, and I love these movies. I'm legitimately excited to sit down and watch The Rise of Skywalker later today, and it's a movie that I've seen 30 times by now, easily. I want to share with you something too before we dive into the content of the show this week, and again, I'm so glad that you're with the show. I really do appreciate it. But I hopped on Twitter before the show started. Not anything Star Wars related. I was just checking my Twitter feeds. I have a couple of different accounts. So I have my @Jon Justice account on Twitter. That's my main account. I use it mostly for radio stuff. So I don't do a lot of Star Wars tweeting from there or pop culture stuff because it's mostly related to radio, and I don't like to cross the streams that much. I also have a @Books EMBARK account that I use for promoting my EMBARK stories. And then I have the My Nerd World account, and that's where I do most of my Star Wars stuff. But, if you're on Twitter, how Twitter curates and finds tweets that they feel like you would be most interested in, right? And using their algorithms. Facebook does the same thing. YouTube does the same thing. I want to read you a couple of tweets here. This is anecdotal. This is just what popped up all together. Sith Lord Olivia wrote this on Twitter. And it's got a picture from Rey from all three films. I don't understand people who say that Rey has no arc. She goes from being a lonely scavenger on Jakku to becoming the galaxy's hero and a powerful Jedi. @Zen Skywalker writes, Star Wars in a nutshell. When Baby Yoda, a child with no training whatsoever, force heals someone, yes, this is great. This is Star Wars. She uses a lot of emojis. When Rey, a trained Jedi, force heals someone, no, she can't do that. WTF, Disney. Then there's one more here, and it comes from @Anish. Says, it quotes from The Force Awakens, that lightsaber, it belongs to me. And then they write, it may not be the best duel, but Rey versus Kylo in The Force Awakens has some of the best build-up and tension in the saga. I love the raw intensity of it. Okay, so why do I bring up these tweets? I bring these tweets up because these are not the only ones that I've seen. I've seen more of these as of late, but the defense of the sequel trilogy against the, for lack of a better word, haters, right? And we talked about this quite a bit last week on the show, and we'll get into a little bit with listener feedback. It's really cool to see, and it's awesome, in my opinion, to see those types of tweets versus the tired Last Jedi Ryan Johnson sucks tweets, right? Those have thankfully faded away. At least that narrative for the most part has. And also not seeing as much of the individuals who were big fans of The Last Jedi but were really disappointed in the way that Ben Solo was treated. It's nice to see people defending these films more often than we had seen in the past, and certainly after their release. And again, like I said, I can't believe the movie has been out 6 months already. That just seems just absolutely crazy to me. And if you missed last week's show, definitely go and check it out. I talk quite a bit about the negativity that's out there. And it's been really cool to see because there has been quite a bit of pushback on that negativity. As a matter of fact, I had to laugh because, and I can't find it now, and my apologies. I actually paused the show there for a minute to go look. But I had seen an individual writes for The Observer. I don't know exactly where the outlet is. His name was Brandon. But he had tweeted online that he was so frustrated with what I had talked about last week on the show. Not me specifically, the content of last week's show, and this this narrative that was going through the fandom that Disney and Lucasfilm were going to be erasing the sequel trilogy, which is what last week's show was about. They had written an article, and the headline of their article was almost verbatim what the headline was for my podcast last week. I didn't think they copied it. I just thought it was a funny coincidence. And so I tweeted at them, and then they said they were going to go and check out the show. So it's just encouraging to see that people in the fandom are pushing back a bit. I know that feeds a lot of the hate that's out there from a portion of the fandom, but at the same time, I also feel like it's really necessary to push back on that nonsense and that garbage because it just isn't needed in the fandom right now. All right, let's go ahead and get to some of the news this week. Now that I've gone off a little bit about The Last Jedi and the Rise of Skywalker.
Something inside me has always been there. But now it's awake. And I need help.
I don't really have a ton to add with this first item. I just thought it was an interesting anecdote. The Empire Strikes Back topped the box office for the first time last week in 23 years since the 97 special edition re-release. A handful of theaters around the country did open up in various parts where, there aren't lockdown orders or new lockdown orders, and that's all I will say about this stupid pandemic. But because of that, there aren't any new movies being released, and so several studios went and gave copies out to these theaters to run particular films, and The Empire Strikes Back was one of them, and it ended up topping the box office last week. How awesome is that? I would definitely encourage you, if you did not listen to, I did 2 different Empire Strikes Back episodes over the course of the past few months. The first one was with the 40th anniversary of the film, and then the second one was I was doing a rewatching of all the saga movies, and The Empire Strikes Back was obviously one of them, and I covered my thoughts about the movie extensively there. So definitely go and check those out so that I don't have to repeat myself now. All right, on to some other items. There's been a lot of casting news and rumors about news that's out there, and I kind of wanted to run through the latest. Alden Ehrenreich, who portrayed Han Solo in Solo: A Star Wars Story, has been quoted as saying, and I'm paraphrasing here, but he's been quoted as saying that he hasn't and doesn't know of any talks about continuing the younger Solo character. He said that he personally would be very interested in revisiting that character and doing a little bit more beyond what he did in Solo: A Star Wars Story. So we know how this stuff goes. Alden Ehrenreich was out there promoting some other stuff that he's been doing. He was asked about it, and we also know that just because these actors say no doesn't mean it's not necessarily going to happen. Look at what happened with Ewan McGregor, and we have some news on that coming up in just a moment. So I'd like to trust that what he's saying is true. He's not really going to be in a position, though, where he's going to be able to unveil any potential new live-action Solo stories of him playing the title character, because that's not how Disney and Lucasfilm works. There is some news that we'll get to officially later in the show about the Bad Batch, which I think means that there's some really bigger things that haven't been announced yet in the future. So I'll get to that in just a moment. On Twitter, Noah Outlaw, very well known within the podcast community, he tweeted this out. Could just be more of a comment, but with all these rumors floating around of various appearances of original and prequel trilogy characters in the live action shows, it's a possibility he has a little bit of information. But what he tweeted here was, I said it before, but don't be surprised if Enfys Nest shows up in the Cassian Andor series. No, I absolutely would not be surprised by that. And as a matter of fact, there's rumors going around of crossovers with these shows. We talked about this in a previous episode, that there was a rumor going around that the live-action TV shows were going to develop into almost a Game of Thrones-like interconnectivity, where the shows would be overlapping with one another. Mandalorian, Ahsoka, maybe not Obi-Wan, but Cassian Andor, and these types of things might be happening. Disney knows what they have with particular characters. I watched the first of the final 4 episodes of the Clone Wars last night. And that moment at the beginning when they arrive on Mandalore and we get to see Ahsoka in full-fledged action is just incredible. And that character, if they can get the live-action version of her, which is supposed to be portrayed by Rosario Dawson, if they can get the live-action version of her right, that can be a live-action version of Ahsoka. That's big screen material, in my opinion. Disney has to know how big and how popular that character is, and what I'm praying they're doing is slowly building up and ramping up to give us a full-blown, live-action either show or film at some point, in the future. I bring that up because I feel like Enfys Nest, for the little time that character had in Solo, also has a lot of potential. She is a very interesting character. And I have to imagine that Disney plans on doing some stuff with that character and that actress in some of these live-action shows, so this wouldn't surprise me at all. One more quick note before I move on to some other live-action casting rumors. If you're on Instagram, speaking of Ahsoka, I want to invite you to check out this particular German cosplayer, Ashla. So it's ASHLAS. _workshop. Ashless Workshop. ASHLAS _workshop. The woman who does the cosplaying in this is hands down the best Ahsoka cosplayer that I have ever seen. I mean, she looks like the live-action version of Ahsoka. I mean, I'd be really curious to get your opinion. I'm actually scrolling through her Instagram feed now, and she does multiple Ahsoka outfits. And when she gets in that outfit and does some of the photographs and the stances, it is the best live-action version of Ahsoka I have ever seen. There's one here of this particular cosplayer doing that sort of that kneeling down, one leg up, hand on the ground Ahsoka move, and it looks like she was the model for the cartoon character. That's how good it is. So go check it out. I'm in awe of how much this girl looks like Ahsoka. It's crazy. All right, Jordan Mason on Twitter, breaker of news, has heard a couple of Disney Plus series being developed to focus on various characters in Solo, but hasn't heard any updates since the start of the year. So again, this could align with some of the questioning and the wording that we're getting from Alden Ehrenreich. I haven't heard anything, but I'd be excited to go and play the character again. Right? Sounds very familiar to what Ewan McGregor did. So we'll have to see, and of course that would align a bit with the Enfys Nest a rumor potentially that Noah Outlaw put out there as well. The other item that's kind of been shot down a bit was this rumor they're going around that there was turmoil on the set of Obi-Wan Kenobi. Well, not on the set because they haven't started shooting, but there was turmoil around the production. And there's been a little bit of clarification from a couple of well-known sites basically saying that it's not so much turmoil around the run-up to the production, but more the rewrites that they did with the change of directors that took place before it got off the ground. They are all, Disney is working together to try to figure out what things are going to stay and which things are going to go from the original stories and scripts that were written. Because if you remember the original rumors when it came to the Obi-Wan Kenobi show, was that the scripts were already done, and we had an actor that was, and we'll get into some details of this here in just a moment. We had a director that was originally tied to this, and then or a writer, and then they ended up being switched at some point in time. So, and maybe that was also had to do with Cassian Andor as well. I might be combining my stories. Anyways, it sounds like there was a big rewrite done on the Obi-Wan Kenobi series, which was originally supposed to be a movie. And that some of the rumors that are floating around right now sounds like there's new turmoil when it actually is more turmoil that had been there for a while already. All right. So here's one of the first big news items that we have this week. And this comes from LRM Online. This used to be Latino Review. And it's a pretty credible website. They've broken some pretty big news stories in the past. And so this can be taken with a certain level of credibility, which is why I'm sharing it with you on the show. But it was only a matter of time, says the article, for this deal to get done. We here at LRM can safely say that Hayden Christensen will be reprising his role as Anakin Skywalker for the upcoming Disney Plus Kenobi series. Our source shared with me that the deal is done, and Hayden will be coming back to the Star Wars franchise. The hope was to have the deal done and announce it for Star Wars Celebration. With Star Wars Celebration on hiatus until 2022, this news will be announced at a later date, closer to the beginning of filming. The biggest news from my source is that Hayden is casted as a regular, so that means we will be seeing Anakin in more than just a cameo appearance. During early parts of negotiations, the role started out as just a cameo appearance, but the growing love of the prequel trilogy and the popularity of Star Wars, the role of Anakin has become a bigger part of the Kenobi storyline. There have been multiple theories of how Anakin would be coming back to the Kenobi series, since at the current timeline of the story, he is currently Darth Vader. While the overall consensus is that we would see Anakin in some sort of dream sequence that Obi-Wan would have, we could also see Anakin in Kenobi's trials to learn how to become a Force ghost. Disney Plus Obi-Wan Kenobi series is scheduled to start production sometime in early 2021. Ewan McGregor is set to reprise his role as Obi-Wan Kenobi, and Deborah Chow will be the showrunner for the 6-episode series. As an avid Star Wars fan, I hope this deal gets done and we see Hayden Christensen back as Anakin. What do you all think about the news? Do you like the idea of Hayden Christensen coming back to reprise his role as Anakin Skywalker? They ask at the end of the article. All right, so I don't think he's going to be Darth Vader. Now, there has been some rumors out there that Darth Vader would also appear in the Obi-Wan Kenobi series. Okay, that's been out there for a while, which would make some sense. And I don't see bringing on Hayden Christensen to reprise his role in the Vader suit. We've already had one of the guys that was in Guardians of the Galaxy, the first one. I can't remember his name right now, but he was the one who donned on the suit for Rogue One, and of course they used James Earl Jones's voice with him being the body actor. If you've watched Revenge of the Sith, you know that Hayden Christensen did get in the suit at the end of the film. But he obviously wasn't suited for it, not being big enough to fill the suit out at the time. It looked fine, obviously, but if you've seen with the helmet off, like his head's like only halfway in the helmet to get the height for Vader. So it would make more sense that he would be portraying Anakin Skywalker, as the article goes and mentions. So we'll do a little bit of what I think and what I hope. And they're kind of interchangeable. What I think is going to happen is kind of what I hope happens. And I hope that we get maybe a story that perhaps it's not flashbacks, doing that thing with my fingers, but more of we get some adventure with Obi-Wan and Anakin during the Clone Wars era that would tie into the time frame of Obi-Wan Kenobi on Tatooine. So again, this could be flashbacks, but I also can see a scenario where maybe they're looked at as flashbacks, but they're more full, fleshed-out storylines where we get these adventures and we get to see more interaction. I am really excited and hoping we see Hayden Christensen portray Anakin Skywalker under a different director and writer. I would like to see the Anakin Skywalker live-action character take on more of what we got in the Clone Wars series. My wife makes me laugh because every time we watch the Clone Wars, she really likes the Anakin character in the Clone Wars, but she doesn't necessarily care for the acting of Hayden Christensen in the prequels, in Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith. And I put that largely on George Lucas's shoulders for the way that he directed the actor. So I would really love to see Anakin Skywalker portrayed again by Hayden Christensen, and both Ewan McGregor and Hayden Christensen look fantastic for their age. A little bit of de-aging could easily put them back in the Clone Wars era for flashbacks or for more of maybe a linear story. Maybe the Obi-Wan Kenobi starts off with us back at, in the Clone Wars with these two characters, and then we move through time and we end up in the second half of the series with him on Tatooine and dealing with Vader after having set up the earlier part of the story with Anakin Skywalker. If this is a story about Obi-Wan Kenobi, right? Okay, so which it is. I know that's kind of the obvious thing, but what I mean is that this is more of this is going to be Obi-Wan Kenobi's single story here in these 6 episodes. It would make sense to go way back and to show more of what we got from the prequels of that time period that really influenced who Obi-Wan Kenobi became, at the time of A New Hope. What do you think? TalkShowNerd@gmail.com. TalkShowNerd@gmail.com. I did have that new address that I gave you last week at the Jon Justice, but I'm having all kinds of problems with it. I tried to send out a mailing list email, and then everything bounced back off that one. So I'm sticking with TalkShowNerd@gmail.com. And if you want to join the mailing list, by the way, just email me, TalkShowNerd@gmail.com, and say, hey, I want to be on the mailing list. Like, for example, if you're not on the mailing list, you couldn't take advantage of this. But on the mailing list this week, I emailed out a bunch of free codes for audiobooks in celebration of the audiobook release of Book 3. So if you're on the mailing list, you could have gotten an audiobook copy of EMBARK 1 or 2 for free. So if you email me, you want to be on the mailing list, I will forward you the emails that I sent out earlier this week. There might be still some codes available because I made a bunch available. So TalkShowNerd@gmail.com. All right, let's get to the big story, and that's Star Wars The Bad Batch, all-new animated series to debut on Disney Plus in 2021. Hey, that's next year. This comes from StarWars.com. Today, Disney Plus ordered its next animated Lucasfilm Star Wars series, The Bad Batch. Fresh off the critically acclaimed series finale of Star Wars Clone Wars, the Disney Plus original series will premiere on the streaming service in 2021. The series follows the elite experimental clones of the Bad Batch, first introduced in the Clone Wars, as they find their way in a rapidly changing galaxy in the immediate aftermath of the Clone War. Members of the Bad Batch, a unique squad of clones who vary genetically from their brothers in the clone army, each possesses a singular exceptional skill, which makes them extraordinarily effective soldiers and a formidable crew. In the post-Clone War era, they will take on daring mercenary missions as they struggle to stay afloat and find new purpose. Giving new and existing fans the final chapter of the Star Wars Clone Wars has been our honor at Disney Plus, and we are overjoyed by the global response to this landmark series, said Agnes Chu, Senior Vice President of Content at Disney Plus. And while the Clone Wars may have come to its conclusion, our partnership with the groundbreaking storytellers and artists at Lucasfilm Animation is only beginning. We are thrilled to bring Dave Filoni's vision to life through the next adventures of the Bad Batch. It is going to be executive produced by Dave Filoni, and Brandon Rao and Jennifer Corbett and Karen Beck will serve as co-producer. Rao is also serving as a supervising director with Corbett as head writer on the show. All right, so my thoughts on Star Wars The Bad Batch. Cool. More Star Wars. That's about the extent of it. I enjoyed the Bad Batch series in that final season 7 of the Clone Wars. I will look forward to this. I will watch this multiple times. That being said, not the most exciting thing in the world of all the things Star Wars can be doing, but that's what gets me excited. So you're probably thinking, what the hell are you talking about, John? This is what I'm talking about. It's what this doesn't say that's exciting. In my opinion, this means that there is bigger stuff being planned. If they're going to go and produce a Bad Batch series, then in my view, they're going to be doing a lot more. If they're going to take their time and energy to produce a show like this, which could be pretty cool, and my guess is that the reception that they got on the Disney Plus streaming app to those Bad Batch episodes was the response was so well received that they saw an opportunity here to continue this story. And it makes sense. I mean, this unique squad of clones is really interesting, and I am very curious to see them in a post-Clone Wars era. That being said, it's animated, and it's not saga films, and that's where my heart rests and lies when it comes to my love of Star Wars. You know, I think the live-action shows can have the opportunity to go and fill in that void a bit, but if you were asking me of what I would want, you know, Bad Batch would not have been high on the list, even though I'm looking forward to it. But again, this tells me that, all right, if they're willing to go and do a Bad Batch series, then that tells me they've got a lot of other things in the works beyond what we've already seen. There still is a lot of speculation out there that and rumors going around now with the confirmation of this. Some individuals that broke this news also had news that there will be a Rebels follow-up. And so if that's the case, then maybe that news is coming down the road very soon. I expect that we're going to be seeing a lot of news within the coming weeks since Star Wars Celebration was canceled. A lot of the stuff that we were supposed to get announced at Star Wars Celebration, depending on what Disney does to sort of fill that gap, is going to get announced in the next coming weeks, and I'm really excited. And so if they went so far as to announce the Bad Batch now, then that gets me super excited for what they might have in store down the road and in the future. And I'm really looking forward to those official announcements when it comes to Ahsoka and these other shows that we keep hearing. Like even Bob Iger, during some of his IgerCon phone calls, has made comments that there are things in the works that have not been announced yet. And so, having watched, and if you haven't checked this out, I would encourage you to do so. If you're a fan of Frozen and documentaries, definitely go and check out the documentary on the making of Frozen, the series that's on Disney Plus. It really is fascinating the amount of work and effort and how many people it takes to get a movie like Frozen 2 off the ground. I wasn't the biggest fan of that film. I liked the first one better, but the behind-the-scenes stuff is a lot of fun. Having just watched that and then seeing the announcement for the Bad Batch, that's what got me thinking down this road of, wow, knowing what it takes to put an animated show of that caliber together. Well, if you're going to spend that much time on the Bad Batch, then what else are you spending time on? That, to me, has me really excited. What do you think? You excited about the Bad Batch at all? Or is it just kind of, I'll look forward to it? Email me, talkshownerd@gmail.com.
I need someone to show me my place in all this.
Which brings us to listener feedback this week. And the first one comes from Brennan Marr, who has his own podcast out there. Page Turners They Were Not on Spotify. I would encourage you to go and check it out. I love his comment here. I'm going to share it with you. Hi, John. I really love your podcast and the positivity it brings to the Star Wars fandom. Keep up the good work. I will, Brennan. Thank you. I run a Star Wars podcast as well, and I have said many times that my love for a film is based more on how the movie made me feel than any other metric. The art of film is extremely important to me, but my emotions come first. That being said, I love The Rise of Skywalker because how it made me feel. Also, it was one of the greatest theater-going experiences I've ever had. I openly wept with joy at the conclusion to the Skywalker saga. I was listening to the great Andres Ace Cabrera, who just won a major competition in the Schmoedown Star Wars division, by the way, and he was expressing similar sentiments that we should go with how movies make us feel as opposed to anything else. What are your thoughts? I 100% agree, and I'm only upset because I didn't think of it myself. It's true, though. And that's what it is. Yeah, and I love that because I am exactly 100% the same way. It's how the movies make me feel, right? It's almost a new version of nostalgia, right? We all know how nostalgia makes us feel. Watching these movies makes me feel a certain way, and all three of the sequel trilogy films make me feel a certain way. I love getting through the film, watching The Last Jedi last weekend, and then making it all the way to the end, and like, oh, I sat down and watched a Star Wars movie. The Rise of Skywalker, right? The emotional impact that I have of that movie, it's, I don't even know how to describe it, but that is such an accurate way, and I do exactly the same thing. My emotions come first, and how a movie still makes me feel is why I go and return to it over and over again. And The Rise of Skywalker is that way. The pacing of that film leading up to that finale, I have certain images that pop into my head with every film that I've seen that I go to grab off of my shelf. I have images of the film that pop into my head before I go and watch it. And like one of them for me, the images that I get, the shot of when Rey shows up on Exegol and the wham, her X-Wing flies into frame with the X-foils open. And then you get the conversation of she's arrived. I loved that idea, and that these Sith loyalists in the Star Destroyer fleet were expecting Rey to come. They've been told she's going to arrive because this is a big moment. It never gets talked about, right? But really, I mean, the individuals on those Star Destroyers, are essentially the same people that are inside that arena. They just happen to be a part of the fleet. And when she arrives on that blue planet and her X-Wing pops into frame, and then she closes the X-foils and goes flying by, and you hear that conversation on the bridge of one of the Star Destroyers. And then just all the way to the end of the movie, how that movie makes me feel when I get to the end of it and we get that twin sun closing shot with her and BB-8. It's just incredible. Thank you so much, Brendan. I mean, man, I was so looking forward to talking about your email this week, and I couldn't agree with you more. It's about how, and that's how I'm able to look past the criticism, warranted or not. It's how the movie makes me feel. Thank you. All right. Bridger Hibbert writes this. Great comments. Very positive podcast. It would be awesome if you could go through the poetry of the Skywalker saga. A difficult endeavor, but an interesting idea. I like it. I'm going to save it. And I have a list of ideas from you guys that write in of podcast shows. So I really do appreciate it. And thank you, Bridger, for the comments. All right. Friend of the show, B, writes this. Enjoyed your comments on the ridiculous stories about getting rid of the last trilogy. It just takes a little moment of thinking and to have it come to you that it's silly. It's called common sense. Keep up the great work, B. Thank you, B. Friend of the show, Shlomo, says, for some reason, The Last Jedi is trending on Twitter right now with overwhelmingly positive posts telling the retcon canon crowd to shut up. I thought you might want to look. Thank you, Shlomo. What's really funny about that is that actually started happening on Twitter right around the same time when I was watching the movie last week. That's what was so funny about that. Yeah, and it's just one of those things where suddenly Twitter erupted with conversation around The Last Jedi, and it was positive. I'm not sure exactly what had popped up to prompt it, but it was kind of the inspiration, too, when I decided to mention those tweets that I shared with you at the start of the show this week. All right, friend of the show, Miranda, writes this. If we don't even know when movie theaters will open again officially, and if the vast majority of movie productions are not physically on set or do not know when they want to start their productions, how in the world does anyone expect 3 movies that have been made that haven't been made already to just magically, or I don't know, undo everything or have a huge do-over or even wipe out the history like it never happened? Is anyone in either studio in a position, let alone a financial position, to completely undo an entire trilogy? There's probably not enough people on site. They already had to cancel their own celebration. Do you think anyone has time to erase a whole movie trilogy? Obviously in response to last week's show. Are they naive? Nobody has the time for that. Even if they did it would be completely impossible and pointless, and the divide would be even bigger. You think it's divided now? Oh, I think I prefer what we have right now. If it had not been for this sequel trilogy, and this is just me, but probably most of these YouTubers would not be where they are right now online. The reason why we see all these videos is because of the sequel trilogy. Oh, and one more thing. You can't make plans for the future if you don't have a past to look back on. Just saying. No, amen, Miranda. You're 100% correct in that assessment, by the way. And something that I failed to talk about last week. So for those that didn't catch the show last week, there was these rumors going around for a bunch of idiots on YouTube that Disney was going to use the World Between Worlds episode in Rebels, and they were going to go and erase the canon of the sequel trilogy and start fresh again, with another episode 7 or something like this. Very few franchises have done this, by the way. A few have, but very few have. And they've only done it in sort of a halfway. So what I mean by that is, like, look at the Terminator franchise. The Terminator franchise attempted to kind of do this very thing. With Terminator Dark Fate, which I enjoyed, that was a direct follow-up to Terminator 2, right? It was supposed to be a film that ignored, the other movies that were made. But even then, because of the time travel nonsense, you can still kind of do the mental gymnastics to make all the movies fit. My point is, they kind of did that with Terminator, which has been a failing franchise, right? It's making less money with every single movie. And yet, even then, they didn't fully commit to it. They were going to, but they didn't. And so, I mean, that was a franchise that was going down. I know people have argued that's happening with the Star Wars trilogy, but it really isn't. Star Wars is incredibly popular and continues to be so, and will continue to be popular for a long time to come. So if you want to hear all my comments, go listen to last week's show. It ain't happening. Thank you, Miranda, for the email. I appreciate it. All right, Arrowall writes this. I am the son and the heir of a shyness that is criminally vulgar. Love the Smiths. This was an email in response to the little deviation that I took last week when I mentioned how shocked I was to find out that in the Smiths song, How Soon Is Now, it was not son, S-U-N, and heir, A-I-R. It was actually son, S-O-N, and H-E-I-R in the lyrics of that song. They go on to write, love Star Wars. The Rise of Skywalker is amazing. Thank you for defending it. Thank you, Arrow. I appreciate it. All right, J.O.B. says this. I swear the deleted scene with Luke building his lightsaber was actually in the movie when it first aired on TV. I remember seeing it when I was a kid and then never saw it again until it was released on the Blu-ray. I hear that a lot from a lot of different people on a lot of different things. When it comes to Star Wars, that they could have swore that they saw this or this on TV or this in the big screen. And at this point, who knows, man? Who knows what, versions made it where? cuts, different various cuts. I mean, these movies have been chopped 3 ways to Sunday over the course of all these years that they've been out there. It would not surprise me to find out that there was an edit of the film that had that deleted scene in it. Although, like I said, if it did, and it was still the rest of the movie, J.O.B., then it would not have made all that much sense because Luke was outside of Jabba's castle when he created the lightsaber, right? And R2-D2 already had to have it. So I guess the assumption is that it took place before that, and he gave it to R2 before he and 3PO walked in, maybe. Could be the case, but who knows at this point. All right. One last email this week from TalkShowNerd@gmail.com, and this is Mr. Maz. The only reason The Mandalorian was received the best out of the Disney era so far is simply because it's not tied to the main saga in a significant way. I won't say it's the only reason, but I will say it is a reason, and I've argued that point before. It has the luxury, it does, of having characters that nobody has any dead set attachment to. Yep. So therefore, people are more willing to accept it and use patronizing phrases like, this is the real Star Wars. People say the sequel trilogy played it safe, but Mando is far safer in my opinion. I don't disagree, as it does nothing new at all with the universe. Yeah, okay, I don't necessarily disagree with that either. It gives us carefully crafted iconography and nostalgia and incredibly simple storytelling. It's well done, but upon rewatching it, it's actually pretty damn boring in my opinion, writes Mr. Maz. With Season 2 introducing multiple canon characters into the story, I guarantee a portion of the fan base is going to turn against it. That'll be interesting to see. And I won't go so far as to say it's boring, but I will say that for as much as I love The Mandalorian, I think when it comes to the uber fan, right? And then there's different degrees, and I won't get into it right now. But when it comes to the fandom, for the hardcore fandom, you don't necessarily need a Mandalorian, right? I mean, we were already happy with it. The Mandalorian seems to serve a certain part of the fandom, even though all the fandom seems to roundly enjoy it, like we talked about in the previous episode. It's the last thing we kind of all agreed upon. It did sort of super serve that part of the fandom that was disenfranchised by the sequel trilogy. I'm hoping they get a little bit deeper, as I've mentioned many times before, into the mythology of The Mandalorian, and we do get more characters, and we broaden things out a bit. I feel like Season 1 was a bit of an experiment. Can this work? It did. Now let's really go for it and push the technology, push that volume screen way of filmmaking that's been documented so well in that gallery series on Disney+. I'm really excited. I can't wait to see the first footage and trailer for Mandalorian Season 2. All right, and that wraps the show up this week. Thank you so much for checking it out. I want to talk a little bit about what's coming up in the EMBARK series, so please hang out after you hear from Obi-Wan Kenobi. But if this is the end of the show for you, again, thank you so much for checking it out. If you want to support the show and you have not picked up a copy of the EMBARK space opera series, go to mynerdworld.net and get yourself a version of it. For those that want to hang out, I'll talk a little bit more about what's coming up and release schedules and what's being worked on right now. But for you, we'll wrap the show up officially. I hope you're safe. I hope you're well wherever you are. And I will talk to you again either next week or right after this. Bye.
The Force will be with you. Always.
My Nerd World.
All right, thanks for hanging out for the after show this week. I just want to take a moment and talk a little bit about what's happening with the EMBARK science fiction series. So if you're new to the show, I am an author. I've written a science fiction space opera trilogy, and I'll give you the details about all 3 books here in just a moment. For those that are familiar with the books already, I wanted to take a moment and let you know the audiobook for Book 3, The Vanishing War, is currently it's in a holding pattern. Audible has approved it. They take forever to bring it to retail. So it's completed. It's been completely approved. I ran into some struggles with getting the audio just right, but it should be available. Like, I keep checking multiple times a day. As a matter of fact, I'm going to go and look right now to see if maybe in the middle of while I was recording the podcast this week, it has actually been posted. And it looks like, as of right now, it is still not available. So, as soon as it is available, though, I will be letting everybody on the mailing list know that the audiobook for book 3 is available. So if you're not on the mailing list, email me, talkshownerd@gmail.com. All right, so apart from that, the first spin-off story, I call it an EMBARK adventure. It is based on an event that takes place inside of Book 3, The Vanishing War. For those that haven't read it yet, I won't ruin it right now. But that book has been finished. It is completed, and it is currently in the editing process. I'm really excited for this book. It's written in first person. It's a lot funnier. It's a single adventure. It's not quite as epic in scope as the trilogy is. But having read through it twice now, I'm really, really pleased with how it came out. So, again, if you want to stay up to date on that story and that book, talkshownerd@gmail.com. Join the mailing list there. Also, there is a cover art that's available if you want a preview of it at mynerdworld.net. While that's being edited, I've actually begun work on Book 5 in the timeline, which is going to be an all-new trilogy. We'll be jumping ahead in the timeline quite a bit from Book 3 and Book 4. But I mapped out what the trilogy is going to be. Took a bit of time to kind of land on a concept that I like, and I'm really, really happy with it and excited to be back writing again. I'm going to try to aim to have Book 5 out probably the very beginning of 2021. I don't think I can get it done, edited, and artwork done before the end of the year. But the writing process is already moving faster than I expected, and the story is a lot of fun. So it might be. And if it is, of course, I'll let you know. So for those that may not be familiar with EMBARK, I'm like, John, you keep talking about these books. What are they about? Well, here's the deal. In EMBARK Book 1, it's a science fiction adventure set in the future. It's a story of a boy who is a massive alternative rock and Depeche Mode and Star Wars fan. It's set in the future, but I develop a plot line that brings in elements of modern day when it comes to pop culture in it. And he's in love with a girl in the middle of the apocalypse. The greatest technological advancement ever made has gone missing, and Earth is at risk. The hunt is on to find the only hope for humanity's survival. And it rests in the hands of these 5 friends. They just don't know it yet. And this is a world in the future where flight culture, air and space flight culture, has replaced car culture. So our hero, Taftgardia, with his friends, will have to fight to save humanity, the girl he loves, and the future among the stars. It is an exciting space opera for those who love science fiction, reading, and movies. And it's a mix of Star Wars, Battlestar Galactica, Fast and Furious, I know that sounds weird, but it is, and Ready Player One. In this fast-paced epic. That's Book 1. In Book 2, they've taken that which is most precious, and our heroes, Taft and Catha, will do anything now to get it back. Humanity now living out amongst the stars after the apocalypse on Earth. Taft and his friends on a far-off world have to unravel the mystery of a new lethal threat to their way of life. That is EMBARK, Treasure in Darkness, Book 2. And then, in EMBARK, The Vanishing War, Book 3, the only way that the Raider Alliance can stop the ruthless galactic dictator Sin Argum is with the truth. The question is, will humanity on a far-off galaxy believe them? The Vanishing War has an interesting subtext that is very much tied into modern society, and especially when it comes to social networking. So these are science fiction space opera tales set in the future that are very relevant to today's modern time without being preachy or political at all. There's no politics in these books whatsoever. So if you want to support my nerd world, you can do that by going and picking up a copy. You can get it in ebook, paperback, or audiobook. The paperbacks are $13.99. All 3 ebooks right now are priced at $2.99 each. So pick up a copy for you or a friend. And again, that audiobook for $3. You can get the audiobook for books 1 and 2. That's available already, narrated by me. The audiobook for book 3 should be available any hour, day now. So I'm just waiting on Audible to send it out to market. You can get them by going to Amazon, Jon Justice, or at mynerdworld.net. Last thing I want to say is thank you to everybody who has purchased the podcast. The books. And listen to the podcast. But thank you so much for supporting the show. Purchase a copy for a friend. I really would appreciate it. If you have purchased the books and read them and enjoyed them, please go and leave a review if you haven't done already. I need all the reviews I can get. They are crucial for future sales on future books. And I really do honestly need more reviews, especially for books 2 and 3. So if you haven't left a positive review yet, please stop what you're doing right now as soon as the show is over and go to Amazon.com. Only people that have purchased the books can go and leave reviews, and it would just mean the world to me. All right, that's it. Thank you so much again for checking the show out, hanging out a little bit longer while I talk about my science fiction books, because selling books is hard, and I'll be back again next week. mynerdworld.net, and thank you for the support.
mynerdworld.net.